Well, thank you all very much for coming, and I also want to thank Michael and Chaucer's for putting on this kind of event and supporting local authors. It's so important to us, and we want to thank you very much. I'm going to give you a little outline of how this is going to go. It is my first book signing, so I hope I don't disappoint anybody that you came down here. I'm going to make some beginning introductory remarks, and then I'll read a little bit out of a couple chapters to give you a feel for what the book sounds like. And then at the end, I'll make a few comments, and then we can have time for comments and questions, and then continue with the signing. Okay. The first time I imagined writing this book, I was about 9 years old, and I was laying under the tree in Alamogordo, New Mexico, waiting for the summer to get over, and I thought, I'm going to write a book someday about my life, because I just don't think anyone would believe what goes on down here in this small town. And so eventually I graduated, or eventually retired, and I said, okay, time to write that book about growing up in Alamogordo, New Mexico. And so over the next 8 years, I started writing about Alamogordo, but the book evolved as I also evolved, and I started adding my college years and then the craziness at Sandia. And then the more I wrote, the more I realized it wasn't a book about growing up. It was really a book about being bipolar and the effect it had had on my life and on my family's. So today, when I start reading the book, I'm going to start in the middle. So just kind of bring you up to speed of where we are. The book starts out with I have an abusive father who gave me the genes for bipolar, a gift of thorns. And he dies, and then I have my years of growing up in Alamogordo. I also, at this point, the reader would also know that I've been diagnosed bipolar later in life. So this is kind of looking back, and I have just graduated with a chemistry degree, and so I'm going to start in the middle. Chapter 34, Albuquerque, 1978. Independent of my straight A grades, my diploma from the University of New Mexico came with an annoying student loan. I needed a job. I had a loan to pay back because my mom either couldn't afford to send me to college or she didn't want to. I paid for my schooling with scholarships, summer internships, and loans. I was so preoccupied with lab reports that I hadn't made time for a job before graduating. Tuesday morning, and after I got my grades, I walked over to the Career Center. I printed out 2 job applications for graduates with a BS in chemistry. My best options were Dow Chemical, a petrochemical company in Freeport, Texas, and Sandia National Labs in Albuquerque. Dow was the largest polluter in the Gulf Coast, and even though I had spent 4 years surrounded by the smell of lab chemicals like alcohol and acetone, I didn't want to live breathing the chemicals in the air. The heat and the humidity were also intense. Sandia, my first choice, was located in the foothills of the Manzano Mountains. Sandia Lab was created in the 1940s as a federal government think tank to engineer nuclear weapons. Sandia was the largest employer in Albuquerque. Along with Kirtland Air Force Base, Sandia was the driving economic force in the region. Everyone appreciated and admired the scientists who worked there. Sandia also offered the highest salaries and 6 weeks a year of vacation, which was mostly unheard of at that time. I had the grades to work there, which wasn't true for most of my fellow graduates. Besides, the job also fit my basic requirements, which were no requirements. I only wanted to work for a couple of years. My plan was to get into graduate school with full financial support. I had a lot of fun in college, and I wanted to continue the buzz. Plus, if I was in school, the government would give me a pass on repaying my student loans for 2 years. I sat down at a typewriter with a transcript in hand, put the 2 pieces of paper and a sheet of carbon paper between them, and crafted my resume. I had a fair amount of work experience. I was a lab tech in a coal gasification lab, a chemistry lab instructor, and a computer programmer for a summer. I was impressed with myself and my accomplishments even before I graduated. Dear Sirs, I'm applying for your position as a laboratory technician 1. I slipped the cover letter, resume, and official transcript into a large brown paper envelope, then mailed it to the address posted in the job description. A week later, the phone rang in my apartment shortly after 8 a.m. I heard a woman's voice, and she offered me a job interview for several open positions at Sandia. When I set down the receiver, I yelped and hollered, "Holy shit, I got an interview!" So, did I buckle down and prepare for my interview that day? No. I got stinking drunk the night before my interview. I could say it was because I was anxious or nervous, but that would be a lie. I was celebrating the interview before I went out. I put my interview suit into a duffel bag and my skin-tight jeans over my ass and went to my hangout. Ned's was a sleazy bar inhabited by a bunch of losers. However, Ned's had the best Western band in town. So if you wanted to dance, you had to put up with the clientele. I ordered a shot of tequila and a Coors, my usual opening round. It was an uneventful night as far as guys went. I danced till the band quit, then drank till they closed at 2. I left the bar alone and staggered over to my Volkswagen Bug, where I had parked on a slight downhill. The starter was out, so I gave it a push to jumpstart it. It rolled forward without much effort. I hopped in, popped the clutch, put it into first gear, and as soon as the engine turned over. Anyone's done that before. I drove down Cole Avenue, a one-way street going the wrong direction. But then I noticed the headlights coming towards me. I made a quick right turn and then onto Lind Avenue, going with traffic this time. That was enough excitement for one night. I pulled into Monty's dirt driveway. I was at his house because he was sufficiently horny to welcome me back anytime I wanted sex. Plus, he didn't live far from Ned's. Walked in, unannounced, made my way to the bathroom, bent over, braced myself with my arms on the rim of the toilet, and puked. After the first eruption, I sat down, put my arms around the cold porcelain bowl, and continued to empty the rest of my stomach. I rolled onto my side and passed out. The commode base absorbed the heat, the alcohol burning out of my bloodstream. I vaguely remember Monty coming into the bathroom while I was throwing up, and he looked there shaking his head. "Looks like you had another good night at Ned's." He didn't help me to bed. Instead, he let me sleep on the bathroom floor. Monty was tired of my shenanigans. When I woke in the morning, I had enough time to grab my bag out of the car, jump into the shower, and put on my suit. I wore a navy blue polyester suit with an A-line skirt on the morning of my interviews. I had ironed my white shirt the day before and hoped it hadn't gotten too wrinkled in my duffel bag. I wore nylons, black pumps, and 2 barrettes to pull my long hair back from my face. My mom had suggested the barrettes. "You have such a pretty face." I thought my most attractive feature was my perky breasts, not my smile, but I followed Mom's suggestion. Finally, I added pearl earrings to complete the wholesome look. And before I left Monty's, I made sure I had a small piece of paper folded around some magic powder in the pocket of my skirt. I was told to report to Sandia's personnel offices. I had to go through 2 security checks before arriving in the lobby. Shortly after I arrived, a man in a suit led me to one of the many light brown structures. Walking from one interview to the next, I surveyed the place. The buildings were all drab and monotonous, just like the people I met. I got a break midway through for lunch in the cafeteria. I excused myself to go to the bathroom. The bathroom stall was the same light brown color as the buildings, but it offered more excitement. I unfolded the paper from my pocket, shook some pretty good speed into the backside of my hand, and snorted it directly up my left nostril. I felt the meth burn my tender nasal passage, and suddenly my body was energized. I was ready to go. So instead of feeling exhausted from last night's partying, I went to the interview after lunch prepared to impress. I walked with some zip in my step, shook hands confidently, and made witty comments. I got a job offer from 5 of the 6 groups where I interviewed. I chose the battery development group. I didn't know much more about the job than its name. The battery goods group stood out as a bunch of nice guys. Getting a job was no problem, but juggling the double life of a nuclear weapons scientist and a raging maniac proved to be problematic. I got by being manic in college because the other 18 to 20-year-olds I hung out with were all a bit crazy. Partying, staying up late, and overdoing it were standard for my friends. But here at Sandia, the people were older and more serious. Life wasn't a party for them. They were working to save America from nuclear war. Illegal drugs, excessive drinking were part of the Sandia scene. I was lucky the real me was never detected on their radar screens. Now, a word about terminology. I know the term crazy makes most people who work in mental health cringe. It doesn't bother me. Most non-crazy people use it to describe people with a mental illness. I also prefer the term self-medication over drug addiction. Drug addiction implies blame. Self-medication sounds more acceptable. Likewise, I prefer the sound of a heavy drinker to a drunk. But being honest, I was a crazy drug addict and drunk. Chapter 35, same time, Albuquerque, 1978. Well, I was sold on Sandia. I received a job interview, immediately accepted it, and was delighted with the salary they offered. I just needed to get through the 6-month-long security clearance. If I didn't pass, I was either taking a job south of Houston at Dow Chemical or heading back to the Career Center at UNM to submit more applications. Plus, if I didn't pass, there was the humiliation factor. Okay, so there's a couple years I work at Sandia Labs, and then this takes up 2 years later. It's chapter 40, Albuquerque, 1980. After Jerry, my boyfriend, and I broke up, my 25th birthday rolled around. If I didn't have a detailed account written with great pride in one of my old journals, I wouldn't believe I was capable of so much craziness in one day. While some budding writers wrote poetry, I wrote day-by-day accounts of my sordid behavior, usually describing my experiences as a great fun. I ignored the fact that my behavior jeopardized my security clearance. The day of my birthday, I celebrated by having sex at midnight, getting up at 7 a.m., cleaning the apartment. Then I got high on champagne for breakfast, took a bubble bath, did the laundry, bought groceries, forgot my car keys twice, and had to break into the place both times. I smoked pot, snorted speed, and lit up cigarettes. My search for this never-ending fun was unstoppable. I was elated to celebrate my birthday and do all my favorite things. I had breakfast with Maggie and lunch with Dwight at a fancy restaurant downtown. He was dressed up as an accountant, and I came dressed as a cowgirl. That night, I put on a feather headband, leather vest, and tight jeans tucked into my boots. My date was late, so I went to dance alone, hoping to find a dance partner. There were two sides to my psyche that night, no doubt partly due to the illegal drugs. Getting dressed, I was ecstatic about the excitement in my life, and I felt good. But on the other hand, I felt scared and insecure as I stood at the bar. I worried about being alone and having no one to talk to. I couldn't relax, not even after a shot of tequila and a beer. My date arrived late at the bar, sober and not in the mood for a wild time. I was annoyed. Going out with him had been a mistake. So before we left, I ended the night with a solo toot of coke in the bar stall bathroom. Chapter 41, Albuquerque, 1980. Little did I know the boom was about to fall. The high I had been on for months collapsed, and the waters rough in its wake. Regret washed over me, and memories tossed me around. I wanted to stop the nighttime madness, but the throttle was struck. I was sinking fast into an ever-increasing load of guilt. As a child, bad things like my dad's temper were unpredictable and unstoppable. Now, as an adult, my wild behavior followed suit. Prescription meds might have helped, but they weren't available to me, so I self-medicated with alcohol, pot, and speed. Shortly after the birthday celebration, Ron called again and asked me into his office, this time at the end of the day. Ron's my boss. Meeting at 5 o'clock was unusual, so I knew I was in trouble. After I arrived and sat down, Ron shut the door. Dale, they want to update your security clearance. In the 15 years I've worked here, I have never heard of anyone having their security clearance repeated. That's it. Thank you very much. I hope it wasn't too long. Okay. So writing a book, of course, is all about selling a book. Although Jeff doesn't think that our investment in my writing studio and my therapy will ever be covered by the cost of selling this book. But really, for me, it's more about creating a dialogue about mental health challenges. And when I first started writing this, I never said it was, first I didn't know it was about being bipolar. But even then, when I knew the book was about being bipolar, I would mention that I was writing a memoir, but I never said it's called Bipolar, Gift of Thorns. And it wasn't really until maybe 3 years ago that I could say it. And after I got used to saying it, I realized, wait, there's no shame in it. It's just a mental health illness. It's nothing more than that. But there is still a very big stigma associated not only with mental health, but other mental health challenges. And so I'm hoping that this book will create and start to help reduce the stigma associated with that. And so I am reaching out to the mental health community here in Santa Barbara and seeing if I can work with them in getting the word out. I'm also doing Amazon ads. My son, the techie, is doing them for me. And I hope that you will talk about the book to your friends and also get it started with dialogue. And please write an Amazon review. Even when you buy it at Chaucer's tonight, you can write an Amazon review. It only needs 1 star. I don't even think you have to write anything. No, it needs 5 stars, but it only needs 1 word or something. So that's it. I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments they have for
I do.
me. Yeah.
So in the process of writing it, did you rely on journals, or how did you remember these things?
I did rely a lot on my journals.
Okay.
I didn't know how to write. Typical of someone who's bipolar, you're just like, oh, I think I'll write a book, having no knowledge of how to even write. And even before I started writing this, I hadn't read that much. I was always drawn to memoir, but I was a little bit embarrassed by it. I didn't even know it was a genre. I thought it was just like people would write about crazy things, and I liked hearing about all these weird stories. So I started taking writing classes, and I probably took 20 writing classes. So everything in this book has been critiqued by 20 students before then. So every morning for 8 years, I would get up, I would write for 2 hours, and I would just write it story by story by story, and usually doing it through a series of writing classes. I was also going to a shrink, and so in various parts of the writing, I was also going to therapy. And the last therapy, which ends in the book, it was pretty much about dealing with the trauma of writing the book. So it was a lot to get it out and to relive the painless experiences.
Was it painful, the reliving the experiences?
Yeah, it was. And I had also saved, ever since I was like 7, I was writing diaries, and everything. And I had a diary from when I was like in 2nd grade and 5th grade and junior high and high school. And I found it when I was in college, and I'm like, at different parts, I was like, oh, look at this. I was so amazed. It was all about boys. It was like boyfriend. I had nothing in it. It was just like who I was seeing at the time or something. It was crazy. But I lost it on the bus, so sorry about that record. But also when my father died, I inherited all my mother's, his letters to my mom and all my mom's stuff. And then a lot of times when I had boyfriends, they would like send me back their letters, like, collect them and stuff like that. And my mother had also previously given me all these notes that I had written her that are quoted in the book. And I have like boxes of journals and stuff. I still write every day. And most of it is just lost into my, ADD madness and inability to concentrate. I actually stopped smoking pot and drinking alcohol because I couldn't after I started to put it together in a book, and I had all these stories, I was like, I couldn't find what I'd written yesterday, like I couldn't remember the file names. So that, and for other reasons, I stopped smoking pot. And it was hard to write the whole thing. I read probably 100 memoirs before I finished this thing to learn how to do it. In fact, the name, A Gift of Thorns, came from one of my classmates in one of the critiques of my story. She said, it sounds like a gift of thorns, because I was very smart and I was able to do, take on all these different challenges, but there was this other side of it, which was kind of thorny. Yes. Was that too long, honey? Okay. He's giving me signals.
How were you nervous about how your husband and kids and close friends were going to react to the content in the book? Having read the book,
I know wondering. You were shocked. I know. I was very worried about it, and as anyone, when you take classes on reading memoirs and you read the instruction books on it, they say just block that out tell the story and don't think about it. Just tell your story. It was really, really very difficult to do. And I didn't let Jeff read any of it until it was in a version that looked like
really?
this. And we were looking for typos. So that was the first time he did it. Well, I take that back. The section I wrote about Jeff being so great, I let him read that section. And the editors were always saying, we need to hear more about Jeff. And I'm like, no, it's all about me. And anyway, he got in there a little bit, and he made me change some of the stuff that was in it.
It's all been positive feedback from your friends and family and children?
It's been 100% positive feedback from everyone, including Jeff, who's been an amazing support through this. I mean, even after all the, sex and drugs and everything that I go into in this book, he's been 100% really, really wonderful and understanding and supporting me. In fact, we went through his contacts so we could text 35 more people last night and send them the Independent article to come today. So he's been with me 100%. The kids, I sent them copies, and my son Tad's great, the boy, of course, he's a nice guy. He's like, his only comment was, so you think Dina, which is my youngest daughter, is the smartest and most athletic? I go, well, yeah. And he goes, yeah, she is. And he just gave me a big hug and said, Mom, I'm so proud of you, and he supports me. My daughters, that's another thing. The middle child's like in therapy. She can't read it yet. She's dealing with her own mother issues, which would be me, which I don't know how she has any issues growing up with a bipolar mother. But her husband read it, and he really liked it. My youngest, I don't know if she'll ever read it. It's just way so much Dina. It's just not her. I don't think she'll ever read it. And I encouraged her partner she lives with to read it. So, but yeah, that's the hard part of it.
Is there anybody in the book that doesn't know they're in the book you don't want them to see?
I changed everyone's name in the book. My boss at Sandia Labs, he doesn't know about the book, and I kind of can't find him. I'm kind of hoping that the FBI don't read the book. And I am thinking.
7 years ago.
That's what I think. And I wasn't, I didn't get high or drunk or anything when I was at Sandia, and I never messed around there. I mean, it was 100%, on task. And so, I hope that comes across in the book. And that is the truth. But I am going to University of New Mexico, and I'm hoping to do a signing there because my high school reunion in Alamogordo, our 50th reunion is this year. So I'm going to do a big signing there. So I don't know, we'll find out if Sandia, if they like being written about or not. They're still there.
Was there a time early in your childhood, or was there a time at some point in your life coming up from, like you said, when you were a young kid under a tree to in your professional life that you, through college, your professional life, did you consciously consider that you were different?
It's interesting.
Unique. I prefer the word unique, not different.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's one of the first questions the shrink asks you when he's doing an evaluation for being bipolar.
Huh.
He goes, so do you feel like, or have you ever felt like you're different? And it's kind of weird because how do you really know, I said, but yeah, you know what? I have always felt that I was a little bit over the top. Like there was a little bit something that wasn't quite right for me. And what brought me to the shrink was when we had a near-death experience with Jeff, and it kind of threw me back to when I was 7 and my dad died, and it triggered this reaction to me where I was just like, okay, there is something wrong with me, and I can't do this, And so that's when I went to.
Was that emotion fear or
yeah,
sadness?
it was definitely
was it
fear.
A spiral.
It was fear, and it was worrying about being out of control. I just didn't think I could handle it, and I think I felt like I was 7 years old again, and my dad was dying, and it was like I say in the book, it's like this dark reaper was going to come and take this perfect human being, Jeff, away from me, and that this house of cards that had been built up around me was going to go. I just thought this isn't something I can do, So I'm really glad that I was diagnosed what I was, and I got medicated because this just made it so much easier now. And I don't know, Liz probably knows any difference from before or afterwards.
100%.
I was just thinking about writing you an I'm sorry note. Remember we bought this stack of cards and it said something about eating pie or humble pie or something like that. You said, buy a bunch of those. And so I still have a bunch of those cards and I thought, maybe I only want one. Actually, I was going to send out a few of them. I'm inviting some friends over for a women's dinner party, and I thought maybe some of these friends need one of those cards before they come over. So, if you've been a friend of mine for a while, you've seen both sides of me, and you've probably thought, interesting. Not everybody, maybe Mona. Some people haven't, I suppose. I want to introduce Morgan Green. She was the first person who ever edited something I wrote. It was a story about a trip to China. It starts out, I didn't really want to go to China, and I talk about these 3 stereotypes I had about Chinese people. Morgan sat down and just tore into me for 2 hours. Like nothing in it was right. I didn't do this and everything, and it was so valuable because I got a tough skin after listening to Morgan, and she was right. And after her direction, it got published. My first thing I ever wrote got published at the Montecito Journal. I made like $135 or something. And then I couldn't bribe her or anything to ever read anything I took. But she was once an editor and worked for the Santa Barbara News Press for 30 years and everything. And now she's a very talented artist herself. But she was my first editor ever. So thanks.
Take one more question. Anybody else?
No? I showed it
Oh,
to
I have one.
Yeah.
So, do you have another book planned? Next book planned?
You know, they say I should write something now that I kind of got it all and, everybody's reading it. So I'm like thinking, the bipolar mother or something. But my son said to me, if you're going to write about us, like, do we have any kind of say in what you're going to say about us? I do. I have like this much material from all these journals and stuff. And I have like journaled when we were in Switzerland for 2 years, and then I took 1 year of our life and journaled every day when the kids were in elementary school, and then I journaled one day, like every day while they were in high school and junior high. So it was like, a year out of their junior high years, 2 years out of Switzerland when we were all babies and living in a French-speaking country. I got the one I really want to get out there soon is called Trapped at Home with 2 Teenage Daughters. One was 9th grade and one was a senior. And Jeff was working all the time, and they were horrible to me. So every night before I went to bed, I wrote down all the things they were fighting about and what the wars were about, and it's really hilarious. But I don't know.
You might get sued.
My middle daughter, Margot, she read it and thought it was hilarious. The younger one's like, it's too soon for me. No, I don't have anything planned.
Real quick, you were in '78, engineering was typically not a field that a lot of females were going into.
Yeah.
What drew you, your desire to go into engineering, or was there a desire, or what was did you find interesting?
I just always was good in math and science. It just came very natural for me. My mom wanted me to be a home ec major. I'm like, Mom, I know how to use a washing machine. I've been cooking for the family since I was 7. And I did really well in it. It was my first degree was in chemistry and math, and I loved it. It came really natural for me. One of the things I kind of regret is like, gee, I wonder what I could have been if I had actually not, partied so much. I did study 4 days a week, but the other 3 I was like out of control.
Okay, I'm going to ask one last. So,
Okay.
being who you are,
Yeah.
working in a conservative organization, was it difficult?
It was difficult because they were all working so hard, and they were so diligent and they were so like serious and there were things like unions, and that always rubbed me wrong. So I did have a lot of friction, and some of it I write about in the book. There was a lot of friction of me working at Sandia Labs, and my poor boss, Rod Quinn's his actual name. The poor guy had so much on his hands with me. He was like, I'd get upset and I'd go just running in there and throw myself in his lap and throw my arms around his neck and start sobbing because he reassigned me to somebody, and he's like, okay, get off of my lap. I was just a mess when I was at Sandia Labs. So I don't know what they think of me. They probably thought I was crazy, which I was.
Well, Dale, thank you very much for
Thank you
joining us.
guys all for coming. Thank